start by saying how much I appreciate the effort that all of you put into the P20 Council. Just incredibly important work going on, and I am grateful to all of you for the roles that you play. 4 years ago, Delaware found out we had come in first place in the Race to the Top competition, and I thought that this would be a good opportunity for me to bring you up to speed based on all the progress that we have made since that time, and that is really what this is all about. I'd say, first of all, we're certainly not, we haven't achieved everything we'd like to achieve, but I think we have built a really strong foundation, and much of my comments today are really around that foundation. Let me start in just giving you some perspective about why I think this is so incredibly important. I have been, for a long time, a believer that one of the most important jobs any governor can have is to have a perspective about how the world around us is changing and what those changes mean for our people and what it is that we need to do differently in light of those changes. And to me, the big change over the last 20 or 25 years has to do with the global economy. And people have been talking about globalization for a long time. And honestly, I think it's been, until the last few years, I think it's largely been more about the rhetoric than it is anything else. I think people have thought about globalization as moving a few low-wage manufacturing, light assembly jobs or call center jobs overseas. And that's really and it's about how countries are going to compete with each other based on just low wages. That's not what I'm talking about. And that's not really the world that we live in. And I've traveled, as you probably have seen over the last few years as governor. I've had the opportunity in my prior life to travel very extensively, and as governor I've had the chance over the last few years to do some traveling as well, mainly in the context of economic development. And whether it's been to China, to India, to Israel, or frankly to Chile where I was, or to dozens of other countries that I have not visited, the real story is how you drive down the streets of drive down the roads of any of these countries these days, and you will see any number of multinational companies that have set up shop. It could be Google, it could be Microsoft, it could be IBM, it could be DuPont, which just within the last couple of weeks announced that it was opening a research operation in South Africa. That's the real world we live in. And the bottom line is that these employers have more places to choose from than they ever have before. Because what they care more about than anything else is where can they have access to a great workforce. And the bottom line is that businesses which 25 years ago would by necessity, if they were going to open up a new operation, by necessity it would have been in the United States, maybe Western Europe, maybe Canada or Australia. Now they have their pick around the world. And in a world where there are 3 billion people looking for jobs and there are 1.2 billion jobs available, it is no exaggeration to say that we are in a global war for jobs. And more to the point, we're really in a global war for talent because the jobs are going to go where the talent is. And it's really in that context that I have been thinking about all the work that we've been doing over the last few years and all the work that there still is to do. So when we applied for the Race to the Top grant back in the beginning of end of 2009, beginning of 2010, it was clear, I think, to many of us that the status quo would not be good enough for our kids' futures. And that's sort of what brings all of us to this room, and I think that's what brought all of us to that competition as well. Even though there was plenty of really good work being done in our schools, we knew that we didn't have a system that was going to allow us to get to the next level, which is to make sure that our students were really able and prepared to compete effectively against the best of the best from around the world. They were struggling to meet a bar that was too low. We had a bar that was too low. And some of you may remember one of the first things we did is we raised that bar. And people said, you can't raise the bar, you can't tell more parents and kids that fewer of them are going to be judged to be proficient, even though they don't know anything less than they did before. But we said that we're going to be a lot more honest with our kids about what proficiency really means, and that a dose of honesty was very much in order. So I remember we did those, we called them our conversations around stronger schools, where we had this very direct conversation with parents and students about what it meant to raise the bar. Only 66% of our kids were graduating from high school in 4 years. And the bottom line is that in terms of student achievement, we were really middle of the pack. But that was in a system where our per pupil spending was actually pretty high. And so when your per pupil spending was pretty high and you're getting middle of the pack results, that wasn't acceptable. And it wasn't acceptable to anybody who cared about education in the state. And so we were unbelievably, I think, fortunate to have the opportunity to bring together stakeholders from across the state who cared deeply about making sure that we took our education system to the next level. And it really meant building a strong foundation. So part of the opportunity that was presented by Race to the Top, again, although we had done plenty of good work, we could not afford some of the very extensive and expensive upfront costs that were necessary to build this strong foundation. And so Race to the Top provided us some of the funding that was necessary, but that was possible at that scale only from the assistance of the federal government. And I think that was particularly important. And so what this whole Race to the Top application gave us the opportunity to do, we had already been at work. Secretary Lowry had already been at work pulling together stakeholders, educators, teachers in the classroom, school leaders, district folks, the business community, parents, the disability community, and others, bringing everybody together to write the plan. And this was a plan that was absolutely, of, by, and for people who cared about our kids. This was not a plan that was written just in the Department of Education or in my office. It was an incredibly, inclusive project with great leadership from the State Board of Education as well. And so getting that really extensive input from our educators was really, really valuable. And so 4 years later, I believe, and I think the evidence shows, because of that plan, we are definitely making progress. Delaware's teachers and students are getting support to address our challenges now, and we've built that foundation that I talked about in terms of helping us take it to the next level as well. So let me just go through this a little bit. Let me start with how life is a little bit different and better for teachers. So today, teachers in Delaware schools have resources that were not available before to help them make the biggest possible difference in the classroom. For one thing, we've given them better insight into the performance of their students through the development of our world-class data system, and we've offered real training to teachers, to educators, and administrators alike to help them use it productively. And Secretary Murphy mentioned in the introduction, some of the recognition that work around data has generated. And I want to say how important this is, because the data work, it sort of sounds like it's just talk until you understand how it's used. And what I really like about the way we've built our data system, this is all from the bottom up. I mean, this is by student. So we know by teacher, by classroom, by school, by every subgroup imaginable. So this is real data that is incredibly helpful to teachers and parents alike in terms of helping them understand the growth that students are making. But the use of the data doesn't stop there. Because it's bottoms up, it's helpful to principals, it's helpful to districts, and it's helpful to the department. So I have sat in from time to time when our Department of Education has meetings with our districts. And when the districts come in, they come in with not only the superintendent and school board members and union representatives. Everybody, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but we're not all entitled to our own facts. So I think having this data available in that way is incredibly grounding and making sure that we're all operating from the same set of facts. And this data is even more powerful when you layer on top of the fact that every one of our teachers every week spends 45 or 90 minutes sitting down with 5 of their peers. So 6 of them sit as a group to drill into what the data is telling them about student performance and figuring out as a result how they ought to be intervening differently with their students. And we call them professional learning committees. That's what these meetings are called. And I love sitting in on them because they are so powerful. There's nothing, this is just all, it's real. And it's listening to these teachers talk to each other about what the data is telling them. And as it was recently, I visited Thurgood Marshall School, listened to some teachers talking about teaching long division. I remember sitting on one at Marbrook Elementary School in red clay. And I'll never forget, at the end of the session, this was a 45-minute session, and at the end of the session, the 6 teachers said, would you mind if we bring our union rep into the meeting? And I said, okay. And I really didn't know what was to come, and I thought maybe it's not a great sign, but the union rep came in, and I said, why did you want to come? And she said, because I think these PLCs are so great. And she said, I've seen these education fads come and go. I hope this isn't one of them. I hope this is something that really lasts, because it's so real. And so many teachers have told me these professional learning communities are the best professional development they've ever had. Because instead of a bunch of people sitting like you are looking at me, it's a bunch of teachers, educators, who are where the rubber meets the road, sharing with each other. And I think it's incredibly powerful. It's been wonderful to see how so many of our educators are really demanding more of themselves and sort of taking on so many opportunities, whether it's the summer institutes that we started focused on curriculum for advanced placement classes. Many have benefited from the initiative supporting the transition to Common Core, which I'll talk about in a second. They're all beginning to get the kind of feedback that they deserve through our evaluation system, and that really allows them to set growth targets for their students and have meaningful conversations. It's incredibly important to have meaningful conversations between our educators and their school leaders to improve their teaching. When you talk to teachers, they value the evaluation. They especially value the evaluation if they feel there's some kind of improvement opportunities linked to it, which is what we're all trying to do to help all of our teachers get better and better. We also made some foundational changes in order to be able to attract and retain the best educators. That's why we recruited this recruitment website. It's a one-stop shopping resource for educators. I went out last year and I talked to education majors both at the University of Delaware and at Delaware State about the steps that we're taking and try to make it easier for them to find the right teaching opportunities. We've invested in some alternative ways to bring talented people into the classroom, whether it be Teach for America or the Delaware Leadership Project. With the help of legislation passed by our General Assembly, and I really do want to thank Senator Sokola and Representative Scott for their really terrific leadership of the Senate and House Education Committees, respectively, across a range of issues. But on this particular one, they really helped us elevate the teaching profession by raising the bar for educator preparation programs in terms of what it takes to be able to get into one of these programs, what it takes to get out of one of these programs into the classroom, and what happens while you're in the program in terms of really making sure you're learning research-based practices with respect to reading and math education, as well as proving not only that you have subject matter knowledge, but that you can teach well as well. Looking at it from the student side, we have invested heavily in our teachers because we know that when they're at the top of their games, students succeed. But we're also very much supporting the students directly. We feel so strongly that the success in secondary school and college or the workforce begins in early childhood. And I want to point out, Nick, there are a lot of people I could point out, but I really want to thank you for your leadership around the early childhood piece of it. The work that we have done to retool our STARS program, the work that we have done, again with the support of the General Assembly and just fantastic leadership from the business community, to make sure that more of our youngest citizens are enrolled in the highest quality preschools. We have made so much progress just in the last 3 years. Just in the last few years, we've more than 2,000 additional kids enrolled in the 3, 4, and 5 STAR programs. It's been, and also I want to thank the folks from the congressional delegation from their help as well. From the time our students enter the public schools, they're held to higher expectations. We overhauled the statewide assessment to better measure their progress toward college and career readiness. And we're going to take the next step in the upgrade next year when we align the assessments to Common Core, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. To reach their potential, every student can benefit from extra help along the way. So academic and attendance interventionists in the Capital School District, academic deans in Red Clay have provided targeted counseling to students who are struggling with academic and life issues that are interfering with their success in school. We've improved after-school and summer school programs, expanded childhood opportunities like the Indian River Project Village that provides resources for ELL students. There are a lot of ELL students in Indian River and other districts and their families. To tie back to what I talked about earlier in terms of the global economy, we have started our World Language Immersion Program. This year, we have 850 kindergartners and first graders who are learning science, social studies, and math. Thanks, Mark. I could brief. Learning science, social studies, and math in either Chinese or Spanish. They're going to be proficient by the 4th grade, and by the 9th grade, they're going to take and pass the AP test. And in a world where we're talking to employers from all over the world about doing business in Delaware, thank you. Matt, I know you were about to jump up and get that for me. But in a world where we're talking to global employers about the benefits of doing business in Delaware, what an incredibly positive signal it sends when we say we're making investments in our 5- and 6-year-olds so that they're going to be ready. This is not going to pay off next year, but you talk about things that we're doing today that are going to pay off years from now. That's definitely one of them. Been a huge focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, and Terry Quinn Gray, our president of the State Board of Education, is also serving as the co-chair of our STEM Council because she has a PhD in chemistry, and along with Judd Wagner from the Brandywine School District, who's the other co-chair, just doing amazing work. And we were together just a couple weeks ago in the Capital School District at Dover High School to celebrate an investment that Ashland, one of our employers, is making in STEM education. Districts like Cesar Rodney have established 9th grade success academies, and in those cases the freshmen attend like a school within a school so they can adjust to the academic and cultural rigors of high school before integrating with other students. More and more students are taking advanced placement classes. So all of this is just incredibly important, but we know that even with all of these efforts underway, we only really fulfill our responsibility to these young people if we know that they've got the resources that they need to transition to the next steps and be ready for a world in which so many jobs, basically every job, is going to require some kind of training beyond high school. It doesn't mean it's college, it doesn't mean it's a 2-year degree, but some kind of training beyond high school. So tomorrow, I'm going to be speaking about a new initiative mentioned in my State of the State to help students for whom college is not necessarily the right path, and we're working to create opportunities for them to acquire professional certificates in manufacturing before they leave high school. But we also want to do everything we can to ensure that those who could excel in college have that chance. So we now pay for every high school sophomore to take the PSAT during the school day, not during the weekend, and for every high school junior to take the SAT during the school day and not on the weekend. And so we have just unbelievable data now in terms of how these kids are doing. And we really try to look at all this from a problem-solving perspective. And so we took a look at research that's been done within the last couple of years by a professor at Stanford that has identified there are so many, across the country, there are so many low-income young people who have the potential to be successful in college. But they don't apply because they think they can't afford it or because they come from a family where it's not really within the realm of their experience. And so we partnered with with the College Board, first state in the country to do this partnership. Maybe still the only state, or? Yep, okay. Where we sent packets of information to these college-ready students in Delaware. All low-income students received who could be successful in college automatically received an application fee waiver. You know, these fee waivers have been around for a long time, but they're complicated to get because you got to, submit all this information. And now they're getting the information immediately as soon as they get their scores. And those who are, do really well on their SATs are also getting a special letter from the Ivy League institutions inviting them to apply. But we've got great support from Delaware State and from the university and our other Delaware institutions. And so we followed up on those mailings with really extensive outreach. And it's been phenomenal. And it includes opportunities for students to write essays during English class, to fill out their applications during computer lab. And we have hundreds of volunteers across the state, university students and from some of our employers who have been working with our students and our families to make sure that they fill out the information. And the the response in our first year, we had this this initiative called Getting to Zero. We didn't want any student who could be successful in college not to at least apply. And we would have had hundreds and hundreds of them. And thanks to this initiative and all this outreach, where do we end up? Do we end up at zero or like a few? One student. We have one student left, which is pretty amazing. And I mean, previously, there would have been hundreds of these students who wouldn't have bothered to apply. So Shauna, great job. So I don't have any illusions about the hard work that remains, but I think we should be very proud of the progress that we've made. We have seen concrete signs that the policies funded by Race to the Top are working. More of our students are staying on track. The state's dropout rate hit a 30-year low this year at 2.9%. Fewer of our ninth graders are falling behind, which means they're more likely to graduate high school and persist into higher education. More of our top teachers are staying and remaining in the schools where students need them the most. More of our struggling schools are showing improvement, with about 1 in 5 making double-digit gains in the percentage of students reaching their growth targets. As I mentioned, more of our students are taking AP courses and passing AP tests. I don't have the figures here with me, but it's noticeable. As I mentioned, more are applying to college, all of which is really important. So the question is, where do we go from here? From the very beginning, people said, well, Race to the Top is not going to be sustainable. Well, let me tell you, I would not have put my signature on the application if we didn't understand before we even applied what the issues around sustainability were and how much it was going to cost us. You know, a lot of people have asked us what's going to happen when states no longer can count on the infusion of the federal money. And so first of all, I think that view misses the point of what this work has been all about. We had to create this lasting change, and we had to make some big upfront investments in some of these systems in order to serve as a foundation going forward. And we can maintain our progress at a fraction of the cost of the Race to the Top funding, because we no longer need to build the new data system to track student progress or to develop the new state assessment to ensure we're effectively evaluating our students. And when you add it all up, we know that sustaining Delaware's effective initiatives over the years will cost, annual cost will cost less than the $10 million that it cost us in upfront money to build the data system alone. Let me take a moment to address Common Core specifically. This is one of the most important things that we can continue. And there's a lesson here. And one of the things that Justice Brandeis said, that states are laboratories of democracy and we should learn from each other. Massachusetts 20 years ago decided it was going to build higher standards and it was going to hold students to higher standards. Well, you look now, year after year after year, Massachusetts students do amongst the best in the country. And they compete pretty well even in the international assessments. And so the idea that we would shrink back from these higher standards is just something that I don't find acceptable. Obviously, we have to get the implementation right. And I'm telling you, I visit so many schools where the implementation is very much on track. A couple weeks ago, when the former Vermont governor, a Republican, Jim Douglas, was here, and we're Democrats and Republicans around the country are trying to work on this together, we visited Lancashire Elementary up in the Brandywine School District. And we visited a first grade class of Miss Grantham. And it was awesome to see these students. She was teaching them, they were teaching each other about animals. And so not only, she would say, okay, well, she'd ask questions and the students would answer the questions and she'd say, well, where do you get that answer? And they'd say, well, I got it from the text. And so there was a lot of that. But then she asked questions like, why do you think the teacher wrote this book? And the answer to that was not in the text. The answer to that was in these kids' brains, and they had to be thinking about it. And then we went into a fifth grade class, Mrs. Fry. And not only was she doing the kind of worksheets that we've all probably experienced over the years in terms of developing fluency in math skills, she presented these students with problems that had already been figured out. Some of them had been figured out correctly, and some of them had been figured out incorrectly. And the kids had to analyze, why were these problems figured out incorrectly? Where was the mistake made? It's so different than just filling in a bubble. It's really using their critical thinking skills, and it was just very, very powerful. And so I think what we need to do is we need to continue to listen to our educators to ensure that they've got the resources that they need, the support they need to teach to the standards. Later this spring, we're going to launch a new phase in what we call our Common Ground initiative. This is an initiative that many, not all, of our districts have belonged to, where we're helping provide the support to them to make this transition to Common Core effectively. But this new phase is going to include bringing together individual school teams to learn from each other and regular meetings with superintendents to review the plans in the various districts. In addition, hundreds of our top educators are collaborating on best practices, developing formative assessments, and discussing teaching strategies. And the end goal of everything that I've talked about today is to ensure that our students are prepared for the next steps when they graduate. And if they meet these standards, they're going to be ready. Let me just talk about a couple other things that I think we need to work on. I think as we move forward, we're going to want to build on the progress that we've made in ways that we really cannot even imagine today. And that requires an environment which fosters innovation in our education system. State leaders of every political persuasion pride themselves on promoting entrepreneurship and innovation. And yet I don't really believe that we've taken that same approach to our schools, even though their ability to innovate is crucial to their own competitiveness. And more specifically, I think we have one of the most prescriptive, one of the most rigid school funding formulas in the country. There are these very rigid formulas that determine how many assistant principals, how many reading instructors, how many administrative assistants a school will have. That does not leave very much room for flexibility when our students and our teachers and our leaders are rapidly developing better ways to teach and learn. And that's why I've proposed giving school leaders in a handful of districts the ability to spend some portion of their state resources on implementing their own school improvement plans rather than be hemmed in by this really rigid formula. And our students are going to have the best chance to succeed when we recognize that many ideas that will keep us moving forward are not going to come from me or governors to come or from future departments of education, but from those teaching and learning in our classrooms. And we've got to give them that opportunity. So that brings us back to what is the most important school-related factor in terms of our students' academic success, which is our teachers. And I've talked about the strides we've made to give our teachers the support they need to reach their own potential in the classroom. We've got to continue to listen to them, to invite their feedback, and to act on their concerns. We've also got to entice more of the best and the brightest into the classroom, and we've got to make sure that they stay there. Among other things, I spend an awful lot of time talking with teachers about it. I'm primarily focused right here on compensation, which is really important. There's another piece, which is the environment within the school, which is just unbelievably important as well, because students want to make sure that their voices are respected and that they're heard. But the compensation, we also do require a teacher compensation system that treats our teachers like the professionals they are, which is why we've been working for many, many months now with the folks at DSEA on having a system that really better reflects our values. And that means raising starting salaries to make the profession more attractive to our young people and, for that matter, competitive with some of our surrounding states, while rewarding educators when they provide leadership to their peers and when they excel in schools serving a high proportion of at-risk students. And it drives me crazy when I talk to a teacher, a good teacher, who says they'd love to stay in teaching, but they're going to become an assistant principal because it's the only way that they can see to make more money. Let me conclude. We can't lose our sense of urgency around improving our schools, but I do think it's really important for us to pause to celebrate how far we have come in the last 4 years. And